Well, Michael, thanks so much for coming on the Meat Mafia podcast. We really appreciate it.
Thanks for coming into the studio, making it, I mean, honestly, my office was right next door, so it made it easy on me.
We got a little away game going on here.
Did you hear that our producer shattered his ankle playing basketball?
I heard that he hurt his ankle. I didn't know that was it.
I think
That's
it was
I
ankle
also
shattered.
didn't. Yeah, it sounds bad. It's been like, what, a week?
Yeah, it's been
Yeah.
about a week. We were hoping he was going to make it, but it's a weird blessing in disguise because we're only 2 streets away from you where we record out of. And now we have such a better appreciation just being able to be in the office, get to meet you, get to meet the team. It's such a cool experience for us too. So we appreciate you having us.
Yeah, thanks for coming in. I didn't, Carson over here, who's our producer, if he breaks anything, he still has to come in. So Carson, don't get any ideas, all right?
Carson's always on.
Yeah, always
Right.
on.
Yeah.
Just kidding, but yeah.
But we were saying, both of us are huge admirers of the brand that you and Lauryn have built, not just with the podcast, obviously with Dear Media too. We actually have to shout out my girlfriend Dana because she's been listening to the show since 2016.
Oh, hey, Dana.
And she followed Lauryn just when she had a blog before the podcast.
Oh, that's sweet.
So I think when I first saw the branding, I saw the pink branding and I was like, is this more of a female show? Is there stuff that men can learn? And then Harry and I both just started digging into the episodes and we're just blown away by all the different perspectives of health and wellness, all the different topics that you're able to cover. But for Harry and I starting the Meat Mafia, we're really a podcast about health and wellness and nutrition. And so for both of us, we see everything you've built and we're super curious about like the routines that you have that make you as successful as you can be from a health and wellness perspective. So I think we'd love to just dig into just to start, health and wellness, nutrition. Is that something that you've always been big into even in your early 20s or is it something that's evolved over time?
Yeah, I mean, I've always, I guess, considered myself, like I was never, pro or big athlete, but I was in athletics my entire life. And I remember, I was that kid like 12, 13 years old with the Rocky music in the background, doing push-ups and pull-ups in my bedroom. I think every young guy, as soon as they figure out that like, hey, you can change your body by putting in a little effort, like it was a confidence booster for me. So like it's always been a part of my life and routine. I've always been active. I've always done some kind of fitness. My diet over the years has kind of, been the biggest struggle just because I've never really taken a lot of time to like learn more about it. And the podcast doing that has helped a lot because now I've figured out, okay, like what I can eat, what I can't eat, what protein, what macronutrients, et cetera. But I've always been active. And I think not only for the physical results, but for me, mostly the mental results. Like I was somebody that was, always ruminating in my mind and I needed some kind of physical outlet to get that out and, found physical activity enticing at an early age. And so it's just always been a part of my life.
Was there a point in your life where you kind of let yourself go and saw like the downsides of not taking care of yourself?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's funny because, I think when you're somebody who's been active your whole life and then you kind of start to let it go a little bit, you don't realize, you're just like, oh, I could get it back. But when I had our first kid, Zaza, and I thought like, hey, I'm still in great physical condition. And I saw a picture of myself and I for sure like got the dad bod, the muscles started to shrink. It was like around the time, early pandemic.
I think I saw this Instagram post.
Yeah, no. And I looked at myself and I remember at the time thinking like, hey, I'm fine. But my breath was short and I was definitely getting out of shape and my muscle mass was going down. I'm like, okay, I got to get it together. And that was kind of the antithesis when we moved out here to Austin to say, okay, I'm going to get my shit together and get it back.
And now huge red meat guy. I know you love Force of Nature, colostrum.
Yeah, huge red meat. I've always been a red meat guy. People used to give my dad a ton of shit because I don't think that guy's ever met a vegetable he's loved in his life. Like
Seriously?
he's just like a red meat salt. I think he salts his watermelon. That kind of diet. And so it's always been a part of my life. But again, and we'll talk about this, I think if you're not getting the right protein, as we've learned now, like you're going to really struggle.
As someone who takes care of themselves, I'm always curious. So you're 35, right?
Yep.
Do you see your friends who maybe aren't taking care of themselves as much? And do they like come to you for advice, or is there things that you see them doing and you're like, man, like I can see how this is negatively affecting your life, but like that conversation to have is with people you care about is like so hard.
Yeah, I think I'm passionate about talking about this because, I mean, you guys know when you're in your early 20s or pre-30s, it's easier to maintain good physical fitness, right? Or a solid physique. And it wasn't until I passed 30 that I started noticing, okay, I actually have to watch what I eat. I have to maintain a fitness routine. My body started changing. And before that, luckily, I could kind of just eat whatever I wanted, drink whatever I wanted, not see much of an effect. But as soon as I passed 30, for sure, started noticing, okay, I got to take care of myself. And it's interesting to see some of my friends now. Some of them have gone the direction of, peak physical fitness where they're just fully on it and taking care of themselves. Shout out Khalil. You've seen him. He's out here in Austin. He's changed his life. He's at 50, and he looks phenomenal. And then some of them, unfortunately, have really just kind of let the wheels fall off. And it's not that they change so much about their life. It's just age has taken hold. And so, I try not to preach to people so much about what to do. I try to just be an example in my own life. I just spent some time with a buddy of mine who was kind of struggling. And my approach was not to berate him and tell him what he's doing wrong, but just to say like, hey, here's what I'm doing to get the results in my life.
Yeah. And it's tough too, because with your buddy, he's only going to make the change when he's ready to make the change. So you could talk to him until you're blue in the face, but until he has that like internal like focal point that he anchors himself to, he's not really going to do anything. Right. Yeah.
And I think you have to have that why. For me, my why was pretty simple. Like I had these children and I didn't want to be the dad that couldn't pick up my kids. I want to be able to pick them up and carry them around for as long as possible. I want to be healthy. I want to be an example for them. But again, make no mistake. I think similar to you guys, I am not a health and wellness expert. I talk to great people on the show like Huberman and Atia and, all these guys that come on and this is their space and their authority. And I learn from them the same time as the audience. So I never portray myself to be this pinnacle of health and fitness. I just try to take some of the knowledge that I'm learning on our show and apply it to our life. And again, it's like Lauryn and I always say, like, take what works and leave what doesn't. But a lot of the stuff that we've learned has had a huge impact on our lives.
Go ahead.
No, you're good.
I was just going to say, is there anything that you've noticed that's like kind of in that 80-20 realm where you're just like, I will do this until like I'm 60 years old, 70 years old?
Yeah. I mean, again, I found weightlifting early in my life and luckily I enjoy it. A lot of people struggle with weightlifting because they maybe don't enjoy that physical activity. The thing I struggle most with is cardio. I got to work on that a lot more and it's something that I'm starting to do, but I've always enjoyed weightlifting. So that's something like consistently, no matter what, I've always come back to. And then it's now I look at it as it's not something that I'll do on and off. It's just something I'm going to do the rest of my life. My dad started to, he's 79 now, and he started to kind of get out of shape around 72, 73. And we got him on a weightlifting routine and the guy's solid now,
Really?
Mind is super sharp, body's super strong. And it just proved to me like you have to do it. It's not something you just do once in a while. It's just something you have to do the rest of your life.
Yeah, it's just a habit like anything else. You just wake up, you go to the gym, you don't even think about it. It's second nature.
It's like brushing your teeth.
Yeah. You've had some good sound bites on just hustle culture, and I've heard you talk about monk mode before. I was listening to the Jay Shetty's podcast with Ari Emanuel, and one of the things that he was talking about is now he has this crazy like 10 to 15 step morning routine where it's like red lighting, probiotics, sauna, cold plunging, etc. And then he kind of contrasted that with when he was building out Endeavor. I think him and his partners were working 18, 19-hour days. And I'm just curious, for like a newer entrepreneur that's trying to build something from scratch, do you view like, is there some like sacrificing of the body that almost comes with the mission? Or do you think that you can be prioritizing health and wellness and also build a badass business, that those things support each other?
If my wife was on the show, she could take up an hour telling you about her morning routine. Before I had kids, my morning routine probably was around a 3 or 4 step routine. My routine now is whatever the hell's going on in the house. And again, this is why I think it's so important to prepare your mind and prepare your body, because I don't have the luxury at this point in my life to wake up and have some crazy intensive morning routine. I could maybe if I just, like, at one point I was that guy that was like, hey, you get up at 5 a.m. and you do all these things, you set the day. And then I've learned over time, my body responds better if I can sleep till like 6:30 and get that full 7-8 hours in. And so, if I wake up and my kids are going crazy in the house, that's what I'm doing. And I don't let it get me bent out of shape. Like I know some people feel if they don't do that morning routine, they can't start the day. I think it's a benefit if I can do it, but I don't feel I need it. I feel like I'm in a good enough place now where I kind of hit the marks. Things that I will make sure I do every day though, is like, I will read every day. I will work out in some kind of way, whether that's some cardio or fitness. I will do something, whether it's a cold plunge or sauna. And I feel like that's enough for me to get going. I think, we've interviewed so many people that have these extensive morning routines, and I've noticed some of them it really works for, and some of them, if they don't hit that morning routine, it completely derails their day. And for me, like, I've always been in the latter camp where I just feel like it's nice if I can do something, and I will. But if I miss it, like, I'm not going to be derailed. I'm ready to go.
It's almost like this dichotomy of you have things that will make you feel as good as possible, and you hope that you can do those, but life happens, shit happens. You're not going to be able to do that. And if you can't do it, just still get up and just have a great day as well. Like, don't be a slave to that routine.
Yeah, I think like, unfortunately, I think a lot of people are really fragile with this stuff, and stuff rattles them way too easily. Like, life is chaotic. Life is hard, you know, especially when you have more obligations. When I was in my 20s and I didn't have a family and a wife and kids and a business and all these things, it's like, you know, much easier to hit all these things. But now there's a lot of moving parts and there's a lot of different people relying on me. And, you know, like I said, life is chaos. And I feel like if you get so tied to these things that have to happen in your day for you to have a good day, it can have the opposite effect that you're looking for. So for me, I just want to be in a mental state, in a physical state where whatever comes my way, I can handle.
It's like being so strong that you can take, like, you are malleable, and like that malleability is strength in itself. You know, like how to get yourself back on track and just like do the basics to feel good and continue making momentum forward.
Yeah, I just firmly believe like that is the goal in life, is to make yourself mentally and physically strong enough to deal with whatever happens. Because as much as we'd like to predict and map out our days and our months and our years, like shit happens, you know? And I want to be somebody who's in a position where whatever happens, I have the mental and physical capability to say, okay, I can handle it.
We have heard that you have a Patrick Bateman-esque skincare routine. Is this true?
You know,
or is that Lawrence?
Listen, I learned, and I'm sure there's mostly men listening to this, a lot of guys are resistant to the skincare routine, which I was one of these guys. And doing the show with my wife, I had so many doctors and experts. You learn the skin is the biggest organ of the body. And, you know, it shows, it's the first thing you present. And especially for me, you know, like you guys, I'm on camera and I'm talking to all these people. And when I learned about how to take care of your skin, you know, whether it's properly hydrating or, you know, proper skincare routine. Again, it's like brushing your teeth. And Lauryn jokes and says it's this massive routine, but this is something that I can do in 3 to 5 minutes when I'm getting ready, brushing my teeth, combing my hair. And it's easy, right? It just, I didn't have the knowledge to do it before. And also food plays a large part in that as well.
Totally. Have you gotten into any of the regenerative skincare, like the lard and tallow brands that are coming out?
No, but Paul Saladino came on and I think what did he rub on my face? I think he was rubbing some kind of
tallow or something.
Yeah, beef tallow on my face.
Were you glowing?
I was glowing and I felt good. Lauryn and me were, I mean, it leaves a scent, that's for sure.
Oh yeah.
But no.
We left a little pig lard skincare product in that goodie bag. It's actually amazing. Like, it's so versatile. You can throw it in your hair and stuff. So
I'm down for it. I'm not one to shy away from some pig lard.
It's crazy. We heard about it. Our buddy Charles, so he's a regenerative farmer out of Tennessee. And so I guess a lot of people don't know this because tallow has gotten so popular, but pigs have the most similar pH to humans out of like any ruminant type animal.
That's why we do surgery on pigs, because they're most similar to humans.
And the tallow gets hard at room temperature. Lard actually gets it's like a creamier consistency. And we've been using it for like 6 months, and your skin literally glows when you take it. It's wild.
Done. I'm sure I'm going to try.
You have another step to the routine.
I'm going to show up to the bedroom tonight with pig lard on my face. And
I think Lauren's going to love it.
Yeah,
honestly.
She probably will.
Is there anything that you wish you were doing when you were like 18 to 22 years old? Because I just view that as such a core, those are like the core years where you can really change the trajectory of life. And you can do that at any moment in your life, but that is really where you can like make so much progress and kind of outpace everybody else. Yeah,
I'll give you a physical one first and then a mental one. I mean, I'm one of those guys that had a lot of fun in my youth. I still have fun, and I recommend doing so, but probably partied a little too hard, especially with alcohol. And the more I've learned about that substance and you know, really the negative effects it has on the brain and the mind and just everything, probably could have done a little bit less of that. Because, you know, like I said, I think people are now coming around to the fact that it's just not great for you, but we used to really go hard on this stuff. And so I would have been doing less of that. I think that contributed to poor sleep. I think it contributes to anxiety. I think, you know, it really kind of takes you out of yourself. And I'm not saying not to drink. You know, I just got back from a trip and with a bunch of friends and had some fun, but it was just too excessive and too much. And I think a lot of young people kind of fall in that trap, especially now. And so I would have done less of that. And I also think that I was really hard on myself and still am to a degree when I was younger, thinking that I needed to be much further along, much faster than I needed to be. And as I reflect now, and I think this only maybe comes with age, is you really don't realize how much time you have. I think like, you know, in my early 20s, I felt like I needed to get everything done right away. I needed to close every deal. I needed to bring as much money as I could. And, you know, I think I sacrificed a lot of happiness because of that. And so what I tell people, especially people younger than me now when I'm talking to them, is like, you have so much time to kind of figure out your passion. What I do now in this office we're sitting in, there's no way if you would have asked me 15 years ago if I'd be doing anything like this, there's no possible way I would have looked at you strange. And so I just think like young people need to realize they have a lot of time. They have a lot of time to screw up. Lauryn and I just did a show all about tasting different things and, having those failures and taking those big chances before you have obligations like a family or children. So yeah, I think like just being a little more patient and being easier on my body. Like there was very little sleep, a lot of partying, probably way too much work, and I could have, paced it out a little bit better.
It's an interesting dichotomy because you said that in some ways maybe you were a little bit overly hard on yourself, but also you being hard on yourself allowed you to achieve like an incredible level of success at a young age too, right? That you wouldn't have had if you weren't so tough on yourself. But I guess there's a balance to that too. And it seems like maybe you've consciously kind of forced yourself to slow down a little bit. Would you say that's accurate?
Yeah. What's funny is I'm probably like, I've sped up from a quote unquote, maybe like business success level but I'm doing it in a much more calm and I think practical way. I think before when I was younger, it was just like pure brute force and like stress and anxiety. And I there's that saying like that what got you there in the first place may not be the thing that can continue to get you there. Right. Like, I had a lot of success really young. I was a self-made millionaire before I was 25 years old. Right. And I say self-made in the sense, like, obviously there was a lot of people that partnered with me and helped me along the way, but meaning like nobody gave it to me. And I had no context of what to do with that. And so I made it and then burned it all and had nothing to show for it and was sitting there. And probably if you guys would have met me, in those years, I would have been someone you wouldn't want to sit down and spend some time with, probably too arrogant, just, egotistical, impatient, just all the things that come with early success without the context of a little bit of life. And so again, I think like now I have more of a purpose as to why I'm doing things. The show is there to serve people. I have a family now that I'm trying to support with Dear Media. Like, we're supporting other shows and all the people that work here. And it's more of a reason that's outside of myself, where I think when you're young, there's such a focus on yourself, especially when you have a focus on material goods that, it takes a couple punches in the nose to figure out like, hey, this is maybe not the path and maybe you're being an asshole.
Did you ever consider going down the corporate route, or was entrepreneurship kind of just always your thing?
I have not had a job with a paycheck outside of, unless I was a paycheck for myself, since I worked at McDonald's when I was 15 years old.
Wow.
Dang.
And I don't say that because I'm some kind of genius. I had a father who was very entrepreneurial. I don't remember a single time in my life of him ever saying, hey, you're going to do this, do that, and then one day apply for a job. His thing was always like, hey, you're going to do this and then you're going to go and you're going to build a business. And so I guess I never thought about it. Like, I've never submitted a resume. I've never used my diploma. I've never applied for a job. I just always like, this was the thing. But again, like the businesses were always a little, like it was trying to figure out, like at one point I had an agency, at one point I was in the aviation space, one point I was in real estate. It was like a lot of trial and error. And I think I would have, with different advice, maybe worked under some mentors and gone into some different structures that would have given me a little more guidance. Because again, I figured I had to figure out a lot of stuff early on the hard way. And so I don't necessarily think that path is right. I also think as it relates to entrepreneurship, a lot of people glamorize that term. For me, I don't feel I would be good working in a corporate structure, but I make no mistake that there's plenty of people in those structures that do a hell of a lot better than I do, right? Like the number 2s, 3s, 4s, and some of the biggest corporations in the world are way more successful from a financial perspective than I am. I just think that I'm somebody that is geared more towards running my own thing and building my own business. But again, it's not for everybody. For some people it is, for some people, maybe they want to go the corporate route. Yeah, you almost have to know a little bit innately, how are you actually wired? Do you have a higher risk tolerance? Would you do better in a corporate job for a couple of years before you make that leap? That's things that we considered. I've heard you say before that you feel like one of your zones of genius is your ability to sell and build relationships with the right people, not in like a Machiavellian way, just a way to like actually be able to get the deals that you want and close them. And I'm just curious, do you feel like that skill set is something that's innate to you? Is it something that you've really consciously developed over time? Because we always say that if you're a guy in your 20s, the ability to be able to sell anything is so critical. Yeah, I think in anything now, and maybe this has changed, I think you have to know how to sell. Like, I just think it's just, you have to know how to sell yourself. You have to know how to sell a product. You have to know how to sell your business. You have to know how to sell an idea. It's just one of those things, especially in the world that we all engage in now, especially with, all the platforms that we all produce on. So fortunately for me, I think if I was to drum down what I am at the core, is like, I'm a salesman. I've always sold something, whether it's a service or a product or an idea or the show, or if I'm pitching a business or if I'm selling a business, like, if I had to start from square one, what I would lean into is my ability to sell things, right? If I had to go, God forbid, if I had to go get a job, I would go and figure out, like, what is something I can sell for the highest margin to get back on my feet? Is it, building? Is it real estate? Is it a product? Is it a service idea? But I think that skill set is different for all sorts of people. Like some people are just great communicators. Some people are, I'm trying to think of an example. Some people are really good at operating a business and managing a team. Like, that's actually not my biggest skill set. I think you have to know innately what your skill set is. Some people are really creative, right? Like, some people are great producers or are really good video. Like, you just have to know what your main skill set is. But at the end of the day, whatever that skill set is, I do think to some degree you have to know how to sell it.
Mm-hmm. When did you have that realization that selling was kind of your gift or superpower?
I found myself just basically talking my way into different opportunities in life. And I realized that I had an ability to get people to either buy into an idea or believe in an opportunity. And when I realized that, I was like, okay. And when Lauryn and I started the podcast, I said, I'm maybe not the best writer and I'm not going to create the best social content on Instagram or YouTube, but I said, I like to talk, and I think I can convey ideas to people, and I think people can understand those ideas when I'm conveying them. And so that's why we started the podcast. And then, what we did with that is we sold the idea of, okay, the success of this podcast, other people can exhibit that same kind of success. And we brought on more shows and then built this business around that. But it was really built around the idea of speaking and selling something as you're speaking. And I don't mean selling necessarily a product, but just an idea, right? Getting people to buy into to whatever you're talking about. So I've always kind of leaned into my voice to be able to get things done, whether I'm trying to talk myself out of getting in trouble with the principal, or whether I'm trying to, get out of a jam, or whether I'm trying to, sell a service or whatever it is, close a client when I had the agency. It was just like, I feel like that was just the skill set that I was gifted with, and everything else has been a struggle outside of that. But that is the one thing that I'm like, okay, I can always lean into that.
Yeah. Would you say it's more so like life experience that helped you develop that skill set, or were there any like books and resources that like really helped you get better at selling?
Well, first, speaking of books, I was a terrible student, barely made it by, but could always get by. But I've been a lifelong reader, right? I've my entire life, and all sorts of things, whether it's fiction or biography or nonfiction or history, I've just read far and wide all the time. I think without reading, there's no way I would have ever had any of the success that I've had. I think that's been the main thing that has enabled me to have some degree of success. But in relation to that, I think we go back to the first part of the question.
I think I was just asking you, were there any like books and resources that really helped you develop that? Or is it just like life experience that naturally developed?
I think of course like life plays into it, but it's been books, and it's been learning from the mistakes of others. And it's been reading a lot of history and reading how other people deal through hardships. We've had so many authors on the show talking about, all of these different sources of knowledge that they've been able to lean into their writing with. And, people like Ryan Holiday come on the show and talk about stoicism, and we learn about that. And, you have people like Robert Greene come on and talk about human nature. So of course it's like, you're always taking real life experiences and applying them to whatever's going on in your life and making it applicable. But I think if you don't read far and wide and at least learn from the mistakes of others, which is right there in front of all of us, anyone can do it for free relatively, then you're going to struggle.
Is Shogun still a go-to book recommendation for you?
Shogun is still a go-to book recommendation. I heard they're making a series out of it.
Wow.
But again, like, those books, and now we're in a tangent, but the guy that wrote them, James Clavell, was a huge student of Sun Tzu's The Art of War. And he actually did a revision of that. And so a lot of that was baked in to those books. And then he went on to create some business series that take place in Hong Kong and China. And, those books had a huge impact on me when I was a kid, because I read them at a young age and was like, okay, these are how people are dealing with high stress situations and how they're thinking about building their business and how they're thinking about navigating this problem. So of course they had to have some kind of impact. And again, I think people go through life just kind of trial and error, and you can go back to these resources and say like, oh, this already happened to someone maybe in a different way, and maybe navigate some problems that you don't need to go through yourself.
Yeah, being able to contextualize history or just like business lessons from other people is, I feel like, a superpower in itself, just being able to apply that, because there's so many lessons from other people that they're just like willing to hand out there. They want to share their experience, but if you're not looking for that, then you can never actually apply it to your own life.
Yeah. And, I think, Lauryn and I say this all the time. The worst thing that's ever happened to you is the worst thing that's ever happened to you. You could lose a child, you could lose a parent. That's terrible. But, some people, the worst thing that's ever happened to them is they lose their job, right? Or, they break their arm. There's so many atrocities that happen. I think when you read and you see how hard people have had it throughout the history of this world, it gives you a little perspective to say, okay, maybe my life is not so bad. Like none of us are sitting around waiting for raiders to come in and wipe out our family. And,
I think about like Christopher Columbus. I'm like, oh, this is easy.
Yeah,
Like, what we're doing right now is super easy.
Yeah. I mean, if you think like, we just got back from Europe. It was like a 10-hour journey over there. Like people would get on a boat and sit there for months, and many of them would die on that journey. I think like I like to read that so that I can sit back and say, okay, like life is not so tough. I'm sure people have talked to you about Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning. That's a wildly popular book that I'm sure many people have quoted. But you read a story like that and you're like, okay, this person just went through one of the worst atrocities a person can go through. They were able to get through it, write an experience, and inspire all these people. Maybe I can go and find another job, or maybe me losing a little bit of my money is not the biggest deal. Or maybe, I can get back up on the horse, if I put on a little weight. Like it's just comparing things. And I think that's what books do for people.
Yeah. Speaking of books and authors, the podcast that you and Lauryn did with Stephen Pressfield was so good.
Thank you.
He's, Turning Pro is probably our most recommended book that we give to people, because you can read it in like an hour and a half if you're a slow reader, and those principles will just always relate to you. And even someone like him, I don't think he published his first novel until he was 39 years old. And you look at everything that he's gone on to accomplish. So it reinforces your earlier point that you have more time than you think. And a lot of these other people have stumbled along the way to get to that level of success that they have now.
Yeah, I think that was our biggest takeaway from that show, which is, obviously he wrote Turning Pro and The War of Art and so many incredible books. But our takeaway was, hey, here's a guy that has had tremendous success, but for 40, 50 years, he was struggling as an author that nobody knew of while he was doing all of these odd jobs, at some point living in a cabin with no running water and electricity. And now when you look at him, he's this massive success story. But I think, again, people are quick to look at the end of the journey and say, wow, I wish I had that. And they don't realize that, this is decades of this guy putting in the time. And so I think it's so important to contextualize that and not to pick on young people, but at least for me, I didn't have that context when I was in my 20s. And I wish I did, because it would have given me a little bit of breathing room to say, okay, you don't have to be so hard on yourself, and maybe you can do things that are going to drive a little more pleasure as opposed to just like result.
Is there anyone that you guys have had on the show that you wish you could just like amplify their message more, just because whatever they said was just so pertinent or so relevant for people to just understand, whether it's like finding success in life or just being healthier?
I mean, there's been so many. Like Lauryn and I love talking to Robert Greene. He's a soft-spoken man. He wrote 48 Laws of Power and Laws of Human Nature. But I think one of the messages that we always try to amplify from him is like, he wrote that book Mastery. And he talks about how much time people put into just becoming masters in whatever field they're in, and how much time it takes and dedication. And again, I think we live in a world where we're constantly comparing ourselves to people's best version of themselves online. And I think it really causes people to struggle with their own happiness and their own perseverance, because you're sitting there putting in this work, and all of a sudden you see this pretty picture of somebody who's perceived to be much further than you. And I think it takes us out of our power, where you can sit back and say, listen, I got to focus on myself, what I'm doing, put in the hours. So I really like his message. I mean, we've had so many amazing people on the show. When it comes to health and fitness, I think of a guy like Mark Sisson, and I know you guys have had him on the show. He is, I think, goals for 70 years old, like
100%.
Men and women. Him and his wife came on, and I think Mark's got a lot of great messages, but I always also say, don't just do what people say, like do what they do. And if you look at that guy and you look at how he's lived his life, I mean, he's thriving. I'll be running around on vacation somewhere and I'll see him at the same party with his wife, hanging with all the young people and in better shape than most people. And so, I think Lauryn and I's goal with the show is to try to entertain, inspire, educate someone to live a better life. That doesn't mean you have to go, have massive business success, or you have to go be, in the craziest shape ever, or you have to have the strongest diet. Like, I think it's really just teaching people how to improve their lives and be happy. And we've had so many people that have shown kind of like maybe pathways or doorways to get there. And that's what we try to do.
One of the cool things about that interview with Mark is it wasn't just him, you had his wife on too. And I think a lot of people had questions about just like, what has their relationship been like? They've been together for, I think, 40 plus years, right?
Kids, still in a great relationship, still partying together, still healthy together, still active together. I think I've met a lot of successful people that have come on the show, and this is not to pick on anybody, but sometimes some of those people leave and you're like, I wouldn't want that life, right? Like, sometimes people can go too extreme in the vein of health, or sometimes they can go too extreme in the vein of business or whatever it is. You want to have fun in this life and you want to have good relationships. And for me, like, it's a few things. It's like, can you have a healthy relationship with your significant other that has love and support and fun? Can you be in good physical and spiritual, mindsets at all times? Could you, have a good relationship with your kids? And most importantly, like, are you having fun in life doing what you're doing? Like, I've met a lot of people again on the show that, yes, they have it down on paper, but these are not people I would go on vacation with or want to hang out with, right? Like, they're not fun. Not all of them, but a lot of them, when they get so focused on just, the success portion of it or the fitness portion of it, or they like this one thing, like, life's meant to be enjoyed, right? It's not like you're going to get out of it alive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. When you're recording a podcast, is the mindset, I want to create the best possible experience for the guest, the best possible experience for the listener, or is it some combination of both? I'm just curious what your thought process is there.
I've teeter-tottered with this over the years. It's never been about the guest. No offense to the guests. I think they're there to share their message, and we're there to get as much out of them as possible to promote whatever they're doing or whatever message they're giving, and obviously want to service that in the right way. But really, like, the show and the success of the show would not exist without the audience. So what I've always said is it's not the guest, it's not the advertiser, it's the audience. But as I've gotten further into the show, and now we've done this for 7 years, candidly, it's about what Lauryn and I are getting out of it. And I say that not selfishly, but I realize that if we started creating a show only for the audience, or what we thought the audience wanted all the time, and we weren't actually interested in it ourselves or the topic or the person, we were not doing as good as what we thought we could be doing in those interviews. So now really it comes down to, like, are we super fascinated with whatever message this person has to share? Are we going to be curious to keep going on in conversation? Is there something we can pull out of this guest that maybe hasn't pulled out before? And I think if you do that, then the audience has a direct benefit. Whereas if you're just constantly going there and like trying to service an audience, I think as a host, you can start to fall flat because you yourself may not be interested in who you're talking to. So now it's a lot more about, are we interested first? And if so, the audience gets a benefit.
That's been one of the things I've loved about diving into your guys' content, is that it's very clear that you guys are just like endlessly curious, and you guys have curiosity that spans beyond just like health, success. You guys tap into a bunch of different topics. And like, have you always been that way? Is that something that you've always kind of been able to flex and sort of use for your benefit?
Yeah, I think by nature, Lauryn and I are curious people. Right? We like to talk to people. I always say, like, regardless of Dear Media or The Skinny Confidential, like, we would do the show for free just because of the people we get to meet, right? Totally. Like, I would talk to Steven Pressfield for free. I would talk to you guys for free. I'm interested in human interactions and getting to know people, right? And I think going into weird worlds that we are not expert in and learning things that we wouldn't necessarily learn on our own is fascinating. And so, you know, again, I think like if you're going to come into this medium, and a lot of people are jumping into podcasts now, you have to do it from a perspective of curiosity, because if not, like, you may be able to do it for a year, maybe two, but eventually you're going to burn out. And so for Lauryn and I, you know, we've done 600 or so episodes and done it for 7 years. And if we weren't consistently interested in people, we would just completely burn out. And I know sometimes that frustrates the audience when all of a sudden there's like a left turn and they're like, who the hell is this person and what are they talking about? But what you have to understand is that's what enables us to have longevity, right? Like we need to keep it, switch it up. And, you guys have probably seen these shows, like some shows start to feel like the same thing over and over, and you start to see the same guests over and over.
Totally.
And we try to stay away from that because we just know it's not sustainable for us.
Well, even your episode with Mark was a perfect testament to that, of like actually having his wife on. Like that's a unique experience. He's probably never, I don't know if I've ever seen him on a podcast with his wife before.
I think that was the first one.
Yeah. So you're creating a unique experience for the guest and the listener too. Cause it seems like a lot of these guests, they'll just kind of recycle the same talk track. Even when we were prepping for you, it's like, you've been asked so many questions, like how can we kind of steer this in a unique direction where maybe the guest actually has like new perspectives and new insights that they never even thought they were going to have going to the podcast before.
Yeah. I mean, with all due respect, Mark, if you ever hear this, I could have got him on and we could have talked about intermittent fasting and keto and protein and all the stuff that he's phenomenal at talking about. And, he's blogged about and had 1,000 interviews, but Lauryn and I wanted to know, how have you been so successful in your marriage and in your life? And how are you guys both healthy together still? And how have you produced these great children? And how do you still stay romantic and still active? Like, to me, again, he's one of the blueprints for life as you age. And like, everybody should aspire to like, listen, again, he's had a ton of success in his business. He's healthy, he's in shape, he's got a great marriage. And so like, that's what we wanted to get out of that interview with him.
Yeah. A challenge we've been giving to a lot of our friends that are interested in making the shift from consumer to creator is we tell them to just record 4 episodes of a podcast, because if you're recording 4 episodes, you're immediately in the top 10% of podcasts in the world. So you have a little bit of consistency. You'll work on your speaking ability. It's we think it's the best networking tool that's ever existed.
Yep.
And I'm curious if that's a challenge that you agree with or you would push people towards.
Yep. So 7 years ago, if you'd asked me my biggest fear in life, it would have been public speaking. I was terrified of it for whatever reason and didn't think I could ever do it. Now, obviously I speak all the time and I speak on stage and I speak on a mic. And for me, the podcast was also an exercise of just getting comfortable talking. But no, you're so right. I mean, people that want to get into this medium, you have to put yourself out there. You have to be consistent. I always find it funny. I'll put my Dear Media hat on for a second. A creator comes and says, okay, I want to do a show. Like, how much money can I make? I was like, well, listen, like that's the wrong question. The question is like, how valuable of a show can you create for an audience that's actually interested, and how consistent can you be? If you do that, the money parts of it take care of itself. But, this is one of those mediums where this doesn't happen overnight. I don't think Lauryn and I made $1 with our show till like 2.5 years in. And then it was like barely anything, right? And this was early days back when, people had to be explained what a podcast was. Luckily that's changed.
Yeah.
But no, I mean, I've seen so many people enter this space and say they're going to do this, and they get to like 2 recordings and they quit, or they record for 3 months and they quit, or 6 months. And it's funny, like we've seen on the Dear Media side is it's those shows that stick around for that year period. It takes about that long, and then they get that traction and start to have some success, but you got to put in the hours.
Yeah.
Well, it's completely transformed our lives. And I think if you had asked both of us in college what we would be doing at 28 and 20 or 29, sorry, buddy.
Just turned 29.
I don't think we would have said we would have been in the media space, but we basically took the approach of being like, we're just going to podcast hard and go at it 3 episodes a week and be consistent with it and have cool conversations about what's happening in the food system. And lo and behold, a year later, we've built out all these connections that are actually now like fully like a part of our life as we think about business, friendships, relationships. Like most of the people we've had on the show are very like people that we can just like text or we do text on a daily basis. So it's truly incredible what you can do through that medium. And neither of us were in the health and wellness space before. So when you're thinking about like people who are stuck or looking for that next step, it's like, maybe you just start the podcast on the side and see what comes of it.
That's what we did. It was literally a side hustle. I mean, it's funny, it still is the side hustle.
Yeah.
But you're right. I don't think there is a better networking tool that's ever existed, because if you were to, I'll pick on me. If you were to phone me up and say, hey, I just want to come and pick your brain for an hour over coffee, with kids and the business and everything, it's like that's a real commitment for me, right? And I got to really think about that. And I think there's a lot of people that think the same way. But if the approach is, hey, do you want to come on a podcast and talk to this audience about whatever you want to talk about for an hour and shoot the shit, like that's a different ask, right? And so Lauryn and I personally have made so many connections with that exact approach. I mean, we've slid into so many DMs saying, hey, do you want to come on and promote your book or your business or whatever it is you're doing? and the level of access you get to people. So if anything, even if you were going to make no money, just building an audience and building the relationships, that will pay off in other ways that you're probably not thinking about, right? And I think that's what people also don't understand about this medium. It's like it may not be the ad dollars that you get right away, but it's the connections that could lead to X, Y, Z.
Could you have ever envisioned yourself being in media as a kid? Like what was the dream job for you as a kid growing up?
I thought I grew up with a dad who was a developer. I grew up with an uncle who was a general contractor. I grew up on construction sites. I thought that I was, my mom was a property management. So it was like a big real estate family. And I figured that's what I would be going into. I never would, again, public speaking was not my forte. I never would have thought that this is what I would be doing, let alone running a media company. But I think that's what's interesting about life. It's like, what I was saying on this podcast the other day is, I learned how to manage things through running construction sites. And then I learned how to sell things in the aviation space. And then I learned how to do service businesses when I had the agency. And then I learned how to talk doing this side hustle with Lauryn. And you kind of put all these things together and all of a sudden it culminates into like, hey, there's a business opportunity that exists with, this medium. And I built it around something that I like doing and would do for free anyways, right? So the fact is my office is right next door to this studio. I walked in here to do this with you guys, but the whole business infrastructure that we're sitting in is built off of something that I would do for free, right? And I don't know if there's some crazy advice in there. They say do what you love, but I think it's a little bit further than that. I think it's build a skill set around something that you can service with something that you love, but then create a system in which work also becomes play, right? Like, because they call it work for a reason. There's 90% of the time with Dear Media, I'm doing shit that I don't want to do, right? Whether it's HR or payroll or finance or raising capital or managing people, like that's not the stuff I want to do. But I'm able to get through all the shit because of this part, which I love, right? And I think that's what people forget sometimes. They say, do what you love, you'll never work a day in your life, which is horse shit. You're going to work. You're going to fucking work a lot. But the love part makes you able to get through all the shit that you don't like doing.
And I think that's what most people miss, especially with, if someone looks at you, they're like, oh my God, this guy's life is so badass. He's recording with these A-list guests, raising money, starting CPG brands. And it's like you just said, 90% of your day is shit that you don't want to do. We just focus on the 10% because that's all we see.
Yeah. I mean, listen, I'm not going to lie. When HR calls me and says, we got some shit going on here that I got to deal with, my fucking dick shrivels up. Sorry, Holly, I don't know if that's HR compliant. But here's the thing. It's like, and listen, it's a necessary component of business, but it's not why I got into this. Or if I have to sit down and go through a P&L and figure out, what's going on here and what's going on with payroll, what's going on, are we doing, that's not the stuff that I like doing, right? Or, if there's an issue, I mean, we started this business and then the pandemic hit and then we moved to this city and then like the market's been a little shaky, as I'm sure you guys have seen. And so all of those headaches that we've dealt with, which all sorts of other business people are dealing with, the only reason I'm able to stick with it is because at the end of it, I get to do this kind of thing, which I absolutely love. And I think to your point, some people get confused and they think, I got to find something I love because that means I'm not working. I'm working every day on the business and doing stuff that I dislike. Make no mistake, but you're able to get through the stuff you dislike because you love what you're building. And I think that's where they're like, whenever people struggle and they say, I don't know my passion because I'm not always happy doing something. I'm not always happy. Like they call it work for a reason. You have to work, right? Same thing in the gym. Like when you're sitting there and you're burning and you're getting through those extra sets and you're sweating and your heart's about to go out of your chest. Like nobody likes that. But you do it because of the result and because you love the result. Yeah.
It's been cool hearing your perspective on how, I think you said it took you 2.5 years before you made any revenue on the podcast. And I contrast that with, I listened a couple weeks ago to your interview with Scarlett Johansson. And I feel like for me, that was a really cool turning point. To me, it kind of crystallized just how far the brand has come in a fairly short period of time, where it's like, if someone told you when you were 25 that you were going to interview one of the greatest A-list actresses of our generation, you would have been like, you're out of your fucking mind. And then here you are, like you're teaching her about red meat, colostrum. She's going on the podcast because she feels like it's such an amazing marketing vehicle to promote her media company. Like that's how far the industry has shifted in general, but also how far the brand has come in a short period of time too.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny because I guess, I got to give a ton of credit to Lauryn, my wife, because she started the Skinny Confidential in 2010. So was that 13 years? And the reason our podcast started, bright pink and all that colors is because it was really built off the back of the platform that she built. And it was obviously primarily a female audience. And so while I think sometimes some of the Dear Media stuff or even the podcast stuff seems quick. It's like, it's been 13 years of trying to build out this brand and this property together. And, you know, like I said, 600 conversations. And this is what I always tell people. Scarlett Johansson's probably 500 something into the show.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the point. It was 500 something other shows before we interviewed her, or, you know, 400 shows before it's an Ed Milet, or whoever it is. And many of those episodes in that first year or two was just Lauryn and I, or somebody that, you know, by chance said yes to us on Twitter or a DM. And I think that's something that other people need to remember as well. Is like, I would hate if people looked at us and were comparing their new show to where our show is now, because candidly, it's been 650 plus hours of just interviewing, not to mention all the booking and all the traveling. I mean, when I first came out here and interviewed Ryan Holiday, I remember we showed up with a rolling suitcase with all of our equipment, our Zoom recorder, and like went to his little house and, you know, set it up ourselves. We had no producer and we went back home and then edited it. And it was like little headset mics. And I think, you know, I actually love and cherish those days the most. And when I look back, it's like, it's not the fancy studios or the big offices. It's really like those moments where I'm like, oh, I look back on those times most fondly, because it was just, you know, it was the grind. And now, obviously it's matured a little bit, but you know, I don't take for granted that it didn't just happen out of nowhere.
Yeah. I think our version of that is having Taylor Collins from Force of Nature on last year. And it was July of 2022. I was still working a corporate job. Harry had just quit his job. The podcast was not making any money. I was like skipping work meetings to do the show. And we were kind of like a cold DM. You know, he agreed to come on the podcast. One of our buddies had like a camera set. He took off work. We got piled in the car. We went out, we did the interview. And it's like, those moments that give you belief that this is actually real and something is going to happen. It's like, while we're in the moment, we were saying to ourselves, like, we know this is a moment that we'll always cherish no matter how much success we have. It's like, we'll look back on those types of moments.
Yeah. And I think you don't realize what's been interesting for Lauryn and I over the years is, you know, you do a show like this, like right now there's 5 of us in this room, right? And we're just sitting here like this. You don't realize who could be listening at the other end, right? And that's the other thing I found. It's not just the people you get to meet on the show, it's the people that are also listening. Like I made a connection today with somebody who's, you know, a beast in the field that they're in, and had no idea that they were listening. And I've also had experiences where, you know, people have written in and said, you know, somebody in their family was really sick and they got this piece of knowledge from, you know, a doctor we had on, and then they got better. Like I think, you know, it's also that kind of stuff as well. And so I guess what I'm saying to people that are maybe thinking about getting into this medium, focus on the money last, because if you build a show that is servicing people, that stuff that'll inevitably happen, right? I think it took a long time. It'll hopefully happens faster than when Lauryn and I started, because at that time people just weren't spending in podcasts. Now it's, you know, become mainstream. But, you know, I think people get into these kind of mediums, whether it's a social medium or blog or video or podcast, and that's their first question is, how am I going to make money? And it's just the wrong thing to ask. The first question is like, how am I going to be of service to whoever, you know, is listening, watching, viewing? Because the rest of the stuff will happen.
How would you respond to someone that's like, Michael, I get what you're saying. It sounds great, but like, look, you know, I sold my 401k. I'm not really making money doing this thing yet. I'm putting in all the reps. Like, do you have a good response for someone? I'm sure you get that all the time.
Yeah, I mean, it's like quit being a baby, right?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It's like Lauryn and I was running a separate business. Lauryn was working 2 jobs. We started this show. We did it without fail, with no money for 2.5 years while we were working other things to make our income. We would sometimes get home and go in our closet of our bedroom at 10:30, 11 at night and do an episode or whatever it took. I remember we'd, you know, like do that all the time for years. And again, there was no income coming from the show. Like I think what drives me nuts in when it comes to creators wanting to make money in these mediums is they think they need to make it right away. And they're upset when it doesn't happen right away. And it's like, listen, you want to abandon a traditional life, that 9-to-5 job, the stuff that's steady, and you want to go and build this extraordinary thing that is very hard to break into, that many struggle to make a living on. And you want it to happen right away. It's just not realistic, right? You have to put in the effort. And I think like there's nothing wrong with having a day job, working a service industry night job, having a side hustle. Like this is what we did. And you know, I think when people are whining and saying that they can't make it right away, it's like, well, of course not. I remember I had a business partner one time, and I was starting this company, And I called her and I was bitching and whining and saying, oh, this is like really hard, it's really stressful. And I was waiting for her to like give me some kind of pep talk. And she's like, yeah, so of course it is. Like, suck it up. Like, of course. Like,
it's supposed to be hard.
It's supposed to be hard. Like, it's not like if it was easy, everybody would do it. It's really a question of like, are you willing to make the sacrifices to do it? Like, that might mean you're not going to be out with the boys and girls on a Friday night. That might mean like you have to work 2 jobs. That might mean you have to get up a little earlier. Like, but you know, there's no way to shortcut it. And these are things that you have to do.
It makes me think of the power of just knowing what you want to, where I personally definitely went through periods of my life knowing that, or not knowing what I wanted, and you don't press in as hard, you don't lean in as hard, but when you know what you want, you're like, well, I'll just go to the bone to make this work. Like, it doesn't really matter.
Yeah, I mean, we can relate this to fitness. When I decided to get back in shape, and listen, I'm not like some beast, but when I decided to get back in shape, looking at myself, I was like, okay, I'm going to train for a year consistently with a trainer. And listen, it's not lost on me that it was an investment. And fortunately, I was able to make that investment, but I needed someone to hold me accountable. Shout out Brent. He's here in Austin.
So Bodies by Brent.
Bodies by Brent. Yeah. Brent, how are you, buddy? And I said, hey, for 1 year, I'm not thinking about a 6-pack. I'm not thinking about biceps. I'm thinking like, I just want to get in shape. I want to get my cardio back. I want to get in the routine. I want to be consistent. I want this to be like brushing my teeth. And we did that. And then this year, we just passed 2 years training together. I was like, okay, this is the year that I'm going to get in decent shape. And that's what I tell myself. Is I'm going to take a whole year. I'm just going to be in decent shape. And then my next year, which will be 3 years, like now next year is like, I'm going to be a beast. But like I gave myself not a month, not 2 weeks, not a quarter, not like, hey, get in shape for the summer bod. It was like, this is going to be 3 years to get in shape. And I think like, that's how I've thought about basically everything in my life. It's like, I'm going to work this many years to build this base business. I'm going to work this many years to save X. I'm going to work this many years to invest. I'm going to work this many years to get my body. I'm going to work this many years in nutrition. And I think, you know, people, they don't give themselves enough time and they don't hold themselves enough to account, right? Where they're like, I need it right away. And if it doesn't happen right away, I'm a failure, or I'm going to quit, or I'm going to go do something else. And that's just not realistic.
It's like this beautiful war of attrition. And I've never thought about this before. I think fitness and podcasting is actually somewhat similar, where it's like, I think a lot of people get addicted to like Instagram or TikTok, where it's like you have one big hit, you can get 100,000 followers. We've had big guests on the show. You know, you see a little, decent uptick, but you're not seeing this crazy spike. You just keep going day in, day out. I'm sure even you with the fitness journey over that year, you know, you look in the mirror after a month and you get that little dopamine hit because you already look more aesthetic and you feel better. And then you keep going, but it's like you just keep doing one workout out another, one meal after another. And then you get there when you look back.
Yeah, I think like I've just signed up for, I've decided in my life, like I've signed up for a life of suffering, but I think that's a good thing. Because I think so many people go through life looking for comfort. And of course, there's periods of time where you want to take a break and be comfortable and have some comforts in life. But if your goal is comfort and certainty, I think that's a really dangerous spot to get into because you become complacent when you get there, right? And every time in my life where I haven't had something to chase or a goal to pursue is when I've started to go backwards, right? And so for me now, I'm like, okay, consistently, every day, I'm going to do something that's somewhat miserable, whether that's a workout or a sauna or an ice plunge or some cardio. I'm going to do something that challenges my mind, whether that's learning something that I'm not well versed in or having a tough conversation. You know, if I'm being a shitty husband, I'm going to look myself in the mirror and put my ego in check and say, okay, I got to humble myself a bit. You know, kids humble you all the time, every day as well. Like if I want to be the best father I can be. So I'm going to look myself in the mirror at the end of the day. I'm like, was I present? Was I active? Like, you know, was I on the phone too much? Was I, you know, did I lose my patience? And so again, like I don't end my day being like, thank God this was super comfortable. And, you know, that felt good. It's like, no, did you do something to stretch that comfort zone and put yourself out there a bit? Because that's where you grow. And I wish more people would think about it like that because I think we're getting somewhat soft.
Absolutely. One of the things I admired about your story doing research was that you got into business with your dad and were able to start something with him. And I'm just curious about that experience. Like, is there anything that you take from that experience that you're applying today, whether it's just like a foundational principle or just something that you learned from him?
You know, my dad has probably been my greatest cheerleader and greatest teacher. Again, like he was somebody that, you know, no matter what my fuck ups were, he's always saying like, hey, you know, you can do it, which I realized as I've gotten older, a lot of my friends maybe didn't have that same experience. So I always consider myself really fortunate. You know, when we started working together in the aviation space, a company called JetBed, it was a new business. Both of us were in a space that, you know, we weren't well versed in manufacturing and selling product, especially to that industry. But I think the biggest, you know, at the time, there's obviously ups and downs. It's dicey working with any family member. And there's this weird dynamic, especially with me, where it's like, this is your dad, but also, you know, now your partner, and, you know, this person's in this role. It's a little bit, it's interesting. So at the time, it was a great experience, but also sometimes trying on the relationship, just because you're out of that father-son dynamic, and now you're running a business together, which is challenging. I'm sure you guys have had, you know, ups and downs.
Totally.
But I look back on it very fondly now. You know, he still has that business and he's still operating it, because I think it prepared me to work with my wife. Because when we got into business, a lot of the turbulence that my dad and I worked through, you know, having that close relationship, you know, having that familiar bond, I was able to kind of navigate it with Lauryn and I. So when Lauryn and I started doing stuff together, I said, okay, these are the lanes. You know, she was very much on the creative side. I was more on the business side. If there was something that she wanted to do when it came to the content, like, her voice was final say, she would take my input. But if there was something maybe on the finance side, mine was. And so we really, like, from the beginning, divided the lanes. And then one thing I also learned working with my dad is, you know, you really kind of have to have your own thing as well. And so when Lauryn and I started, like, Dear Media is the business I run day to day with our team here, and then she runs her business, and then we come together on the podcast. So that experience with my dad, I think if I didn't do it, I think Lauryn and I would have struggled a lot more working together as a couple, which has challenges in itself. But yeah, no, I mean, I would recommend, if possible, if anyone can work, especially father-son, with their father in some kind of capacity, like, it's a different kind of bond, and, you know, it's something I'll always cherish.
How helpful was it finding, like, your life partner in Lauryn at a really young age?
I mean, I think that's everything, right? And I count myself very lucky. You know, again, I'll talk about my dad a little more. My dad got married in his 40s. He had me at 42, 43. So this guy was fucking nuts for years. He was just running around, partying, doing his thing. Yeah, it's being a nut, you know? And I won't put him on blast too much. But again, when you're a young man and the main guy in your life, that's the example. I figured that's probably what I would do, is I'd be single for a long time and follow that path. And I met Lauryn when we were 12. And, you know, I know this sounds corny, but, like, it was like love at first sight. And we, you know, spent a lot of time together. And then right after college at 20, we got back together and been together ever since. It is so hard to build a business on your own. It is so hard to build a life on your own, you know? And I think people don't realize, like, how distracting the dating world can be. I see it with my friends. I see a lot of people. It's like, when I was lucky enough that I found a partner that was very like-minded. And Lauryn and I always talk about this. We're pushing the same boulder up the same hill. The finances are in the same household, so they grow exponentially. We are managing our money and our family in the same kind of, you know, vision, same kind of way. And I don't have the distractions of running around chasing girls in the bars. I don't have the distractions of being out late. I, you know, am fortunate that I get to work with someone that's building a similar business to me, with me. And so I think because of that, we've been able to kind of exponentially grow. The reverse of that is, and I don't want to give anybody bad advice, is imagine you get into a poor relationship and, like, that can have the exact opposite effect. But as it relates to Lauryn and I think it's been a huge benefit, not only for a support system, but it's just eliminated all of the typical distractions that I think young men go through.
Yeah. And part of why I was asking you that question is, it seems like the last 10 years, there's been this misconception that's been taught that if you want a great career and also a great marriage, those things are almost mutually exclusive. And, like, you know, you need to grind or go into monk mode or whatever you want to call it. And, like, you know, just date around. And to your point, it's like, do you know how much effort it actually is to, like, date around now in modern times? Like, how much energy and money and time that you're wasting?
No, I see. Listen, again, I missed the whole online dating era. I didn't have any of the apps. So you know, a lot of you guys that are in it, like, I don't know what I don't know, but I see my friends that are going through it, and it seems exhausting. Right. It seems, and I also feel like, you know, back when I was dating, and maybe this is going to age me a bit, it's like, I didn't have an app that I could swipe to 14 girls, right? And women, 14 guys, right? It was like, if I got one or two, I was like, okay, I gotta focus here. I gotta lock in, right? This, you know, it's going to take me a while to find another one. And so I can only imagine now with the abundancy of options, how distracting that can be and how hard it is to actually zone in and be like, okay, this is the person that I'm going to focus my attention on. Yep. And for me, again, like, I just think I haven't had that distraction. So when I imagine you get rid of all of that stuff, which, let's be honest, it's pursuing women's is a full-time thing for young men, right? Like, I get it. Don't get me wrong. But I don't have now that distraction where I have to wake up and think about it, or I'm maybe hungover from the night before chasing. Like, I just, wake up, all that stuff's kind of taken care of, and I can focus on the business and the family and the stuff that I need to focus on.
Yeah, it seems like there's a lot of bad advice out there too around dating too, where it's like, I think the apps kind of just like change the expectations of what women are looking for too, whether it's just like, oh, like, you have an abundance of options and you can kind of just like pick and choose and like put together your character almost like in a video game. It's like, that's not really reality. Like, pick someone who has good values.
I think porn and the apps have been detrimental to people's happiness and well-being as it relates to relationships. And I think, again, like, I grew up in the era where if you found a dirty magazine or some VHS, like, you were hiding that in the Men in Black tape and like hoping nobody found it. Yeah. That was like your goal. That was like your thing, right? A friend of mine did that, so I just called him out.
Definitely wasn't you, though. No. Yeah.
Just throwing him under the bus.
We just told that story. But again, like, I think this endless optionality, or thinking, I would say it in a different way, thinking you have endless optionality is a trap, right? I think it, like, focusing down on one person that you're really into, or, and listen, I'm not saying everybody has to go be monogamous and not date. I'm just saying, if all you're doing all day is scrolling, and then you're hitting your dopamine levels by watching porn, and you're doing all these things that take you out of your presence and take you out of focus and distract you, like, it's going to be really difficult for you to get ahead. And I think people are struggling to find meaningful relationships because they feel if something's not going exactly how they want it to go right from the start, they could just swipe to the next one. Where, listen, Lauryn and I have trouble all the time. We struggle all the time, but we're committed to solving those problems together as they arise, right? Like, we just got back. We're both jet lagged. We have young kids. They're not sleeping. And, we're ripping each other's heads off. But we know at the end of the day, we're going to stop. We don't have any other options. We're going to come to the table and solve it together, where I fear that with some of these other things and some of these other options, people feel like, oh, I'll just jump to the next thing.
Right.
And I've also heard you say too, in addition to that it's important for men to ask themselves the question of, like, am I actually a value add to society? Am I actually becoming a value add? And there's this endless optionality, but men aren't asking themselves that question. We had Tucker Max on the podcast, and when he was going through that phase of his life where he was kind of getting out of the dating scene and wanted to settle down with someone, that his psychologist had to make a list of all these different characteristics of what he wanted in a woman. So, like, physical, mental, spiritual, whatever. And then he had this really tough realization of, like, well, if a woman was to make these characteristics for herself, would I actually match up to that? Am I actually a man of value? And I don't think young men are really asking themselves that question anymore, unfortunately.
Yeah, no, I think this is a big one. I'll just pick on men. Some men are delusional on the type of woman they think they can get. It's like, the competition is high, boys, right? You got, are you in shape? Are you eating well? Like, are you well educated? I hate to break it to the guys over 30, but if you're over 30 and your looks have carried you forward for a long time, like, that's not going to keep carrying you forward. You have to be interesting, right? There's younger guys than you. There's better looking guys than you. I think that if you are not somebody with integrity and not somebody that people would want to do business with or be in a relationship with, like, I think, again, you're going to struggle. And so, we put all these, and I think this goes for women too, you put all these high demands on the partner that you're looking for, but you don't sit back and ask the question, am I integrity with myself? Am I holding myself to the same account that I'm looking for in a partner? And so for me, it's less about going to Lauryn and saying, like, I need you to do these things. It's more about, like, am I doing those things, right? And I always find it funny, when people struggle to get in a relationship and they are constantly blaming the other people when their personal life is in shambles, right? It's like, if you're not holding yourself to that standard, why would you expect anybody else to take you seriously?
100%.
I don't know how to ask this question without it potentially sounding weird, but
that's all right. Let's get weird. Let's get weird.
So, your first episode of the podcast, your sister was on the show.
Yeah.
How much of that has relationship, like having a sister helped you kind of like understand this whole world of like the male female dynamic and actually just being able to navigate above like the status quo and kind of like where society is driven the male female dynamic?
Well, I think, having sisters, obviously growing up, I'm the older brother, you're protective. You see how men treat your younger sister. You obviously recognize that. I have a daughter now too. And that was, I think
That'll change the game.
That'll change the game. Yeah. But no, I don't think I don't think it was my sister so much as I just realized from an early age. And I think, again, this is giving Lauryn a lot of credit, where if I didn't conduct myself or don't conduct myself the way that I do with her, like, she would not be an option for me. And I know that firmly, and her as well. Right. Like, I think this is another thing that people get in trouble in relationships. Like, I don't fuck around on Lauryn. She doesn't fuck around on me. We're very blunt with each other. We have conversations. We hold each other to an account. Like, if I'm not taking care of myself, she's going to call me on it, vice versa. And I think we just know we knew from an early age when we got in this relationship, it's like, we're both holding ourselves to the standard. And if we fall below that standard, then we're not going to continue in the relationship. And so again, I think when you start to get serious with someone, it's okay to sit down and say, like, this is my standard, right? Like, this is what I expect co-parenting. This is what I expect in managing the business. This is what I expect finances. This is where I want our life to go. This is, what I consider infidelity and what I don't, right? Because I know there's all sorts of different people that have different perspectives on that. But for Lauryn and I, we talked about it, like, as soon as we knew the standard and that's the bar, like, we just hold ourselves to it. And I don't think enough people, do that in relationships.
Totally. As a dad, is it even possible to explain to non-dads like ourselves how much having kids actually changes you as a man?
I don't think so, without sounding like an asshole. Because, you get those people, they're like, oh, you never know how much you can love something until you have it. That's true. It really is. Like, I started crying when both my kids were born, and I don't cry that easily. I also think it's the first time, you may do this in a relationship, but it's the first time where you absolutely care about something more than yourself. Like, it's just like, there's not a question of, like, when my kids get sick, I wish that I could take all of that sickness to me. I also think a lot of people get scared of having children because they think it's going to slow you down, and it can if you don't set up proper systems, which I'm happy to talk about. But you will never be more driven and have more purpose than when you have a family of your own, right? And I think I heard Elon Musk saying this the other day, with like all the success he's had and all the business he's built, he said nothing in his life has given him more happiness than having children, and I would agree with that sentiment. And so, I don't want to sit here and say to every young guy or girl that doesn't have children, like, this is the thing. But in my case, like, the cliches have been true. It is the thing, and it's helped me focus more on what's important, and it's given me more purpose in building the things that I've been building.
What are some of those systems that you've put into place that kind of just help you focus on spending time with your family, spending time in the business, doing all the right things to just continue to live a great life?
Well, first, your time is much more constricted. So, which I don't think is a bad thing, because I think, when I was I'll just say when I was single, you kind of go through life and it's like, you set your day up. It's these guys with an 18-hour morning routine, right? Like, I don't have the luxury anymore.
Redlighting their balls for an hour a day.
What I commit to now is very intentional, because if it's taking me away from my children, then I need to make sure that it's worth that time exchange, right? Also, it's just a fact, I don't have as much time because I'm spending time with my children. So if I have that hour, I can't lollygag around. I have to actually like be effective during that hour. So I'm much more intentional using it. Lauryn and I are fortunate enough, we're not shy about this. We both work at the same time and work the same. So we have obviously employed nannies to help us when we travel here. And again, like, that has enabled us to go and, continue to do the podcast and continue to run the businesses. And that's something I don't think enough people talk about, is you also have to be a happy person yourself. If I wasn't doing the podcast and running the business, I may not be a happy person, which I think puts me in a position to not be as great of a dad. Because if you're miserable in life and you're bringing that energy back to the house, then that's going to rub off on the children, right? So, even though there's a monetary exchange in order to be able to employ that service, to me, it's getting me some of my time back. It's getting me some of my happiness back. I also think that, with children, you are able to be a little bit more thoughtful about the resources. And we could talk about finances a bit. Like, it's no longer just for Lauryn and I. We're not, using it just for ourselves. You're starting to think like, okay, what's a smart way to secure our children's future, without growing two little assholes, right? Like, they're going to have to work and stuff. But, what am I doing with this to, set my family up for future success? God forbid something happens. So I just think it's a full shift in the way that you conduct yourself, the way you manage your time, the way you think about resources, the reason that you give yourself for doing things, where, when you're just building it for yourself, especially for the young guys out there, maybe you're just, like, hey, I want to like chase a little more pussy and have some fun. And so I need some money to do that. Where if you're a dad and you have responsibilities, you might have to think about it in a little bit of a different way.
Yeah. There's, I come from New York, Harry comes from Boston, and there's definitely this thing going on, or, any city, even LA too, with millennials, where it's almost like the cool thing to tell people that you don't want to get married and have kids. And I think one of the things we're learning through the show is, meeting with older, more successful people. It's like, that's the ultimate reward in life. And I just think about how many people are, we're just being taught the wrong things by society and just walking down the wrong direction. And I think about like the way that you're explaining how much purpose you've gotten from getting married and having kids. And like, you just think about the people that are missing out on that because they're just being told that those aren't the right things.
Well, again, I think it's hard to tell people that are inexperienced. This is not to knock their intelligence, but it's hard to tell people that are inexperienced in life what to value. I mean, you couldn't have told me, right? Like that. There's just that's what happens when you're young. You're arrogant and think you know everything. And it hasn't been until I've gotten a little older where I think I know some things, but there's so much that I don't know. But what I will tell you from my own experience is I did all the things. Lauryn and I had all the success. Like I said, I was financially stable at a very young age and able to experience many of the fineries in life early, and we did it all. And what happens is, it starts to have diminishing returns where it's like, okay, maybe you go on this fabulous vacation one year and you're like, wow, this is the best thing I've ever done. You do the same thing the next year, like, oh, it's pretty good, but I need to up it a notch because it's called experience stretching. I want to up it a notch because I did that last year and it's got to be better this year. And you do that 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 times. And I remember sitting with Lauryn and we were in the south of France and I looked at her and I said, listen, we're going to be in the same fucking place, doing the same fucking thing, maybe with a nicer bottle of wine and a bigger hotel suite next year, but it's going to be the same thing. And I'm bored. Like, this is boring. This is not going to drive happiness. This is going to have diminishing returns. What are we doing with our lives? And we decided to build a family. And now what happens is you get to experience all these things, but from a different perspective, a different reason, a different lens. You have other people that are now, it's just creates more purpose. So I think when you're young, you're thinking like, I don't ever need this, but imagine doing the same thing. If I gave everybody all the resources in the world, you're doing this for 30 years, you're gonna be bored. And I see this a lot, unfortunately, with a lot of my single friends that have made it into their 40s, 50s, 60s. It's like, at some point you're the old guy at the party or the old girl. And that's not a cool look anymore.
Yeah. Are there any experiences that you had from your childhood that you want to make sure or like hope that your kids eventually have?
I think I was a real shithead. I was bad in school. I think I had so many detentions that they had to like convert them to Saturday schools and then suspensions. I think I was out of school more than I was in school. And at one point my dad looked at me, he's like, listen, man, you're a fucking asshole. Like, you need to get your shit together. And he took me on a road trip we drove through Europe. It wasn't something so fancy, but we just went over there and he showed me, he called it his culturing me up trip. And we drove through and we saw all these monuments and we saw all these historical things. And what it did for me at the time was it gave me, and listen, again, this is a privileged perspective. Not everyone can do this, but it gave me such a broader view of the world and of history and of the way different people and different cultures live. I think it's really good to get children out of their environment sometimes. I know a lot of parents find it hard to travel, but just to show them that the world's bigger than maybe their house or their neighborhood or their school, and to give them an education that shows them the world, because you can read things online or see things from a pretty picture, but being immersed in it's a different thing. And so, I think that was a pivotal moment in my life where I'm like, okay, like this is a much bigger place than I thought. And I'm not as nearly as important as I think I am. And I think that was a moment where I was like, okay, like it's time to get it together.
Mm-hmm. We've had some successful dads on the podcast, and the theme that comes up a lot is like, it's a super interesting predicament to be in because you have resources and you innately want to give your kids everything, but you know that by doing that is really harming them in a lot of ways. And I'm just curious how you think about that.
We talk about this all the time. I think that we're at an age now where they're so young that they don't have a context yet of how good they have it, right? I was looking at them the other day. I'm like, this little asshole's flying around and on this boat. I was like, I didn't get on one of these fucking boats until I was like 30 years old. But anyways, Lauryn and I talk about this a lot because we've always worked, and Lauryn particularly, like she worked multiple jobs and was never handed anything. And so, what you don't want to do is like, we're not going to sacrifice and, not live the way we want to live because, we've obviously put in a lot of time, but I think we have to constantly remind the kids, and again, I'm still a new parent, so I'm gonna have to navigate this later, that this is not theirs and that this has been hard earned and that they need to figure it out on their own. And hate to break it to you, but play this in the future. They're all going to be working and there is no trust fund and there is no handing them money. I've seen so many people that have gone that route that have just, become absolute disasters. Again, I think it's because you need to know how hard earned a lot of this stuff is. And you need to have work ethic. I think, and honestly, like some of this can start in the gym with some delayed gratification of like, going in and understanding like what it's like to build your body and eat right and get those results later on. But yeah, for us, it's something we talk about all the time. It's like, you don't want to not provide, but you also don't want to just hand everything to everyone because then you create somebody who, in my opinion, is not prepared for the real world and does not have any context of what's really going on.
What's sort of the vision from here? Like, how do you see things growing for Dear Media and just kind of your family life and everything?
So it's, I've created an interesting situation here with Dear Media where I think fortunately it's outgrown Lauryn and I personally, which is nice. I think, you're in one of the offices here. We have another one in LA. There's a lot of people, there's 70 or 80 shows. And so, it's an interesting period for me because, and I don't think I've ever talked about this, but when you start a business, think about it like this. Think about you're building a ship. So in the beginning, you're the guy with the boards and the nails and you're actually building the physical ship yourself, saying like, hey, can this thing ever float? And then you build the thing and you put it in the water and it's floating and you're captaining it and it's going well. And you're like, okay, I built a ship that can float. And then maybe later you phone in and you say, hey, can somebody else build another ship? And then can somebody else captain that? And then maybe you're the guy that's like, hey, I'm going to go on shore and you guys build 2 more ships and you captain. And then all of a sudden you're the guy that's like sitting in an office somewhere with a radio saying like, hey, what's going on with all those fucking ships?
Yeah.
That's kind of how I feel right now, where like I will learn about stuff that's, or shows that are being signed after the fact, which is not a problem. It's just we've built a scalable machine. And so for me now, I think a lot of my focus is like, what's next for Dear Media? I want to do more in commerce. I want to do more in live events. I think we're going to do more in video. I think we're going to do potentially more in television. I think we might go into some other mediums. I think we started very female focused, but I think the brand is ripe to maybe change a bit and welcome some men. I think there's some categories that we can tap into because I need a new challenge where it doesn't just feel like, hey, there's a new ship in the water, right? Like I want to get back to building. And I think that's a struggle that a lot of entrepreneurs go with is like, for me, I enjoy the building process much more than the once it's built process. Does that make sense?
Totally.
So you love the 0 to 1 process.
Yeah. I think at some point it gets a little less stimulating when you're looking at a spreadsheet and just saying yes or no, or, checking a box saying do this or don't do that. Right. I like to be hands dirty. And so, I think like we're going to look to evolve the business and to add a few more capabilities.
Would you say you're having as much fun now as you were in like 2017?
It's different. I don't know if fun's the way to categorize it, but I think what I'm saying is as I'm starting to layer in these new capabilities, that is it's exciting me again, where before is like the exciting thing was like can you build this entity that's actually going to be able to thrive on its own and scale on its own? And now that it's like, for me to add a couple more zeros from a monetary standpoint, that's great, obviously, but it's not nearly as exciting as the beginning when I said, like, can the thing even work to begin with, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like when we signed those first few shows and got those first few ad deals, now, like, you know, adding another zero to the P&L each year is not, it's not as rewarding. So for me, it's like, okay, we'll hopefully continue to do that so the business stays afloat. But like, what are the other things we can layer into it? And what are the other categories that we can compete in? And that's what I think is going to be exciting for me.
Entrepreneurs have this, I feel like it's this feeling of almost being like in the casino. Like if you know you're going to win, it's not all that exciting, but when you know there's some uncertainty, that's like where the fun is, where you're just trying to get creative and build something.
Yeah. And I think it's a weird thing to talk about to people because on the surface, when businesses are having success, people think that is like, that's the goal, right? Like that's the main thing. But I think people can't lose sight of the reason you start doing something in the first place is out of some kind of passion. And if things don't stay interesting and continue to evolve, then, you know, I keep saying this to people that I meet. All of the material success and all the financial success is only going to fulfill you so much. You have to have a purpose in life. And I think like part of that's children, part of that's pursuing a goal, whether it's taking care of your body or building a business. If your only goal is material things, over time, you're going to get diminishing returns. And we just had Dan Bilzerian on the show who, you know, I'm sure a lot of your listeners know. And we talked about this a lot with him, where it's like, he's experienced stretched as far as I think any man can experience stretch. And at the end of the day, he's like, you know, this is just kind of like what's next? Like, it's like, you have to have a purpose in life.
Yeah. Speaking of purpose, do we break out the quote to put a bow in this conversation? I know you wanted to read that.
I pulled a little quote from your Instagram, which I thought was particularly great.
No, it's good.
No, it was
really good.
Life advice for my son. And I just wanted to read this and just kind of get your take on it live. Son, if I could leave you with only one piece of advice, it would be this. Find a woman that you love more than anything in the world, then spend as much time as possible doing anything you need to win that woman over. Take as many rejections as you need while making yourself into a man worth having. Do whatever you need to do to better yourself and convince her to trust her life with you. Then spend the rest of your life doing everything you possibly can to make her happy, to make her feel loved, to make her feel seen and heard, to make her feel like she is the main pursuit of your life. In return, she will give you everything. She will make you a husband, a father, a man. She will make life worth living every day. She will make dark days bright and bright days brighter. She will remind you that you don't need anything else but what she can provide. She will make the world small and large at the same time. She will keep you focused on what really matters and help you ignore what really doesn't. She will be the smartest decision of your life.
Yeah, I got that off of this fortune cookie.
It's a long fortune cookie.
Yeah, you know, I think it's true. I can't listen. I'm hesitant to give a ton of relationship advice because everybody's circumstance is different. But what I can say in my own life is that if you can find that person, everything else falls into place. It's true. Like, you know, obviously my wife made me a father. We've built these businesses together. We've built a life together. She's eliminated so many things that I know for me personally, you know, I'm a wild guy. And if I was not focused down with one person, my life could have gone in a completely different direction and was going in a different direction at a certain period of time. And so, you know, I think when I hear advice from people that are throwing these kind of ideas out the window, it's like your ancestors, like you have thousands and thousands of generations of ancestors to be able to get you here. And now you're the one person that's like, okay, well, whatever. Like, it's about me. I don't have to keep going. Like, I think about that a lot, right? Like your genetics are there for a reason. And, you know, when you're young, of course, have fun, do your thing. But at some point you want to have a greater purpose, greater than yourself. Right. And for me, that's been my wife and my children. And it's my compass. And I think as a businessman, because a lot of people, I think, stress about stupid things in life. Like, we've gone through the pandemic, we've gone through market downturns, we've gone through ups and downs financially. None of that stuff has really ever rattled me. And it's because I know at the end of the day, okay, you could lose money, you could lose a business, you could, all these things, but is your wife okay? Is your children okay? Are you healthy? Are your family healthy? Like all of those things compared to what can happen in the business context are so much more significant that for me, like it gives me a different kind of armor, because if I'm competing with somebody who's rattled about something that's going on in the market, or someone that's worried about what's going to happen with their business, and they're constantly driven by fear in that regard. And my thing is like, my worst fear is something happening to my family or my wife or, someone I love. Like I don't have the same kind of fear and limitations that they do. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
absolutely. And so I look at it as a little bit of a superpower, because it takes you out of what you think is important. And a lot of people, if their only focus is on themselves and their business or their financial well-being or their material things, like that's a really difficult place to operate against with someone who has a different kind of context, which is, there's things that are just so much more important.
Yeah. I don't know if there's better perspective and life motivation to end the conversation on that. And, Michael, in all seriousness, it means a lot to be here. You're a guy that Harry and I have like admired from afar, to be honest with you, and just really respect everything that you've built. So to actually be in studio, get to sit down with you, ask the questions that we wanted to know for years, and just build a relationship and have you on the show is like, it's genuinely an honor. And we just really appreciate you coming on and doing this with us.
No, I appreciate you guys coming in and really admire what you guys have been doing. I don't do a lot of these. It's always a little weird for me to
be on the other side.
On the other side, because I'm used to, I almost feel like I want to start interviewing you. And I kind of sit back and like, am I talking too much? But then I realize, oh wait, I'm being interviewed. But no, thank you guys so much for coming in, and I appreciate you taking the time and, doing the research on me. And, I know it's not easy to do this, so appreciate you.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it.
Cool.